I attended my church's annual holy day called the Feast of Tabernacles from September 30th to October 7, 2023. At the feast, I read most of the book of Isaiah the prophet in my daily reading and realized that my messages on my YouTube and Facebook channels, Unmasked Truth with Harmanjit Saini, are fulfilling another Bible prophecy as described in this series of videos. This part 1 describes the vile behavior of the Germans I have personally become familiar with. In part 2, I will describe God's opinion of the Germans. In part 3 video, I will describe what judgments God has made about the Germans and their allies in Bible prophecies and messages to me. Hello friends, this is Unmasked Truth with Harmanjit Saini, where I provide unique analysis of world events based on the unmasked truth that after surrender, Germany continued World War II clandestinely and became a killing machine. I also provide true news that you will find nowhere else. This year, I attended the annual holy day called the Feast of Tabernacles, celebrated by God's Church in Panama City Beach, Florida, from September 30th to October 7, 2023. In my daily Bible reading while at the feast, I decided to read the book of the prophet Isaiah. I came across a scripture that made me realize for the first time that my YouTube and Facebook channels, Unmasked Truth with Harmanjit Saini, are fulfilling another Bible prophecy. The main prophecy that my work fulfills is given in Matthew 24, verse 14. And this gospel of the kingdom shall be preached in all the world for a witness unto all nations, and then shall the end come. God's true church has been fulfilling this commission since Mr. Herbert W. Armstrong, through whom God founded the modern era of his church, delivered his first message in September-October of 1928, though he was commissioned by God to do so in September-October of 1917, when his wife Loma Armstrong dreamed a dream in which angels told her that Jesus Christ had a very important work for them to do, which was to prepare for the return of Jesus Christ. Mr. Armstrong passed away on January 16, 1986. Since then, God's church split up into many organizations, but most have been continuing to preach the same warning message to the world. Then, around early 2005, astonishingly, ministers in my church at that time, the United Church of God, began encouraging me, a lay member in the church, to start preaching the gospel message. I started a blog in September 2006. Then, on a weekly basis, every Saturday morning at 9 a.m., I started delivering my messages in English by reading them from my computer beginning in December 2nd, 2006. And then God's angels started making them available to every human being on earth in his or her own language if they wanted to hear them. These messages specifically fulfill the commission to God's church for the end of the end time stated in Revelation 10, verse 11. And he said to me, you must prophesy again about many peoples and nations and tongues, meaning in many languages and kings. Nobody imagined how this prophecy could be fulfilled so dramatically by God making the messages available to every human being in every language on earth. In the introduction to my videos, I mentioned the phrase, I provide unique analysis of world events based on the unmasked truth that after surrender, Germany continued World War II clandestinely and became a killing machine. My purpose has been to expose the Germans as the most treacherous nation on earth who are bent upon conquering the world and bringing all nations under their boot. In the process, I have exposed their vile and evil nature and the kind of atrocities they have orchestrated, though they used or forced other people with financial incentives or threats to commit the atrocities. I have never held back my opinion about how despicable they are because of their wicked and vile ways. Though they terrorize people and nations, I and members of God's church have never been overawed by them. I did not realize that this attitude of God's true church was prophesied in the Bible. Mr. Armstrong often said, I've read the Bible to its very end, and I see that as God's true church, we win. Isaiah 37:21 to 23 says, Then Isaiah the son of Amos sent unto Hezekiah, saying, Thus says the Lord God of Israel, Whereas you pray to me against Sennacherib king of Assyria, this is the word which the Lord has spoken concerning him. The virgin, the daughter of Zion, has despised you and laughed you to scorn. The daughter of Jerusalem has shaken her head at you. Whom have you reproached and blasphemed? And against whom have you exalted your voice and lifted up your eyes on high, even against the Holy One of Israel? The phrase the virgin, the daughter of Zion, refers to God's church in the end time. In prophecy, the church is represented by a woman. A virgin represents God's true church. Zion is also God's church, and the added word daughter refers to the church in the end time. This prophecy says that God's church in the end time will despise the king or ruler of Assyria, whose modern descendants are the Germans, and laugh him to scorn, and will shake its head at him because of his big, swelling, empty, blasphemous words against the God of Israel. When a nation or a people worship Satan, the devil, and believe that he is a greater God than the God of Israel, the creator of everything that exists, including Satan, that nation or its king is shaking its head at the God of Israel and blaspheming him. That's why we despise the Germans and laugh them to scorn. I have laughed them and their leaders, particularly their current president Frank Walter Steinmeier, who is Satan's main contact person of the Germans, to scorn and despise them as the filthiest and vilest human beings on the face of the earth because of their dealings with our nations as well as all nations and me personally. And that is also God's opinion of them, as I will show in part 2 video. The Germans think that they only of all of humanity have the divine spark in them and that they only have the potential for eternal life. We despise them for such pompous delusional beliefs because they are no better than any other human being, and in God's opinion presently are probably the vilest human beings on earth. And as Mr. Armstrong used to say, we know from Bible prophecy how it all ends. We win. God deals especially harshly with people who think they are gods or have the divine spark in them. He drowned in Noah's flood all who had such an opinion of themselves before the flood and had deified themselves. Even today we know them as Zeus, Vulcan, Hercules, Apollo, Athena, etc. I will show from Bible prophecy that God has planned for what God has planned for the Germans to put them in their place when he is done with end time events, and it is nothing good. Now I'll give you some specific reasons why I despise the Germans. They have a certain view of themselves. They also have a view of others, almost all negative, which they like to rub in their faces. Based on my experiences with the Germans, I have formed the view that they are most despicable humans on earth. Growing up in India, I generally admired Germany almost as much as the USA and Britain because of their prosperous economy and technological capabilities. I came to the USA in 1981 to pursue a PhD in marketing. Though I admired Germany and Japan for their technological and manufacturing prowess, I was not satisfied with the explanation that the USA was exiting many manufacturing industries such as electronics or being badly beaten in others such as automobiles because it was losing competitive advantage in them. With a greater number of scientists and engineers than Germany and Japan combined, I felt there was no reason the USA should not be able to compete with them in every industry. Beginning in 1983, I started criticizing the so called free trade because it was leading to the pouring of America. But I still had a positive impression about Germany because there's nothing wrong in winning in economic competition. In 1990, after Saddam Hussein invaded Kuwait, I offered my suggestion to the US government to first build a coalition of nations through the United Nations and then deal with Iraq to avoid the US being labeled a bully. The suggestion was liked by nations at the United Nations, which gained me some popularity. Later in 1990, Satan revealed to the Germans that I had been appointed to the office of a prophet who then spread it around the world. So far, so good. I still had a positive impression of Germany. Then in 1992, I visited Germany for the annual Feast of Tabernacles and spent about 11 days there. That's where I got first negative vibes from them. For a couple of days, my bed and breakfast owner lady woke me up at night by deliberately making noise. I'd already become familiar with such German masquerader tactics to trouble people who did not submit to them. Then, at a restaurant where I was entertaining about 15 to 16 Germans and Americans attending the feast, I was served the worst fish entree and dinner as a whole, even though the waitress knew that I was paying for everybody. Still not to alarm me. Only much later I realized that they had made many attempts on my life during the trip, but God Almighty protected me. Around 1995 1996, the activities of German masqueraders in America began to be discovered along with their global alliances. Their wholesale discrimination against Americans of non German descent, abominable behavior, medical murders, forcing white American girls of non German descent into prostitution, or forcing them to marry interracially, and other vile behavior was slowly discovered. Finally, around 2000 to 2001, their activity of cremating white adults, children, and infants alive was discovered. I lived in Milwaukee, Wisconsin for about 17 years, which was settled heavily by immigrants from Germany. Was proportionately large programming on PBS or Public Broadcasting System from Deutsche Welle, the German TV service. I used to watch the half-hour daily news. I noticed a mild insult directed at me by then German Foreign Minister Joschka Fischer, perhaps in 1999. At that time, Bangladeshi author Taslima Nasreen, I believe, who had been forced out of Bangladesh because of her writings criticizing Islam, was visiting Germany. I sensed that Joschka Fischer was signaling that I should marry her. I interpreted that as an insult because it seemed to imply that he thought I was not worthy of marrying any white woman because of my slightly dark skin. Since then, any time they have had an opportunity to put in front of me tall, well built, then men visiting from Germany or Americans with German names, they have done so, who look down upon me. The message in their whole demeanor, mannerisms, and smirking was clear. They wanted to let me know that I was nothing but some dog or mosquito in comparison with them. For some time, I did not understand why they despised me so much and demeaned me at every opportunity. Then I read about their Gnostic views of themselves and life. They believe they only are divine and have the divine spark in them, whereas the rest of humanity is like cats and dogs with no eternal future beyond their physical lives. They were parading all the tall, well built, good looking Germans in front of me to rub that message in my face while ignoring the fact that there are plenty of ugly looking Germans also, and I saw plenty of them when I visited Germany. And for centuries, they have been pushing Germans with black hair and dark complexion out of the country to immigrate to other white countries so that they can then gloat that they are the fairest looking people on earth. As more of the activities of German and German masqueraders became known over the years, a lot of what had happened to me in my life began to fall in place. I learned that because of my Sikh background, I was mistreated due to persecution of Sikhs at the hands of Indians allied with Germany and German masqueraders in the United States. Here is a partial list of the evil and vile activities that I have personally become familiar with. First, when I learned the reason why the Germans despised me because of their Gnostic beliefs and that they were Satan worshippers and the evil and vile deeds they had committed, I began to hit back. I let them know that their brains had become fetid due to imbibing Satan's ways and philosophies, and only evil and filth can ooze out of them. Secondly, for decades I had experienced a very unnerving behavior from German masqueraders of looking at people, and when they looked back at them with a smile or in other normal ways, to yank away their faces. It's very disturbing to the person who is mistreated in this way, wondering what is wrong with himself that the person was despising him so much with his demeanor. They have invented numerous ways to trouble and belittle people. In addition to yanking their faces away, they have invented nose gestures, loud and unnatural coughing, and other hideous ways to belittle people. Then I noticed that even top German leaders behaved in the same way with other world leaders, including those of America and Britain. One particularly atrocious example was the German President Frank-Walter Steinmeier, who was doing that to world leaders when he was foreign minister of Germany. They hit back at him so hard that he could not take the abuse any longer and was driven from being foreign minister of Germany and instead chose to become the president of Germany so that he does not have to meet world leaders that often. Satan communicates his message to the Germans only through Steinmeier. That's why the Germans will give him any job he wants. He still maintains his arrogant look. These observations and Joshua Fisher's gesture to show his disdain for me resulted in my losing all respect for any German leaders, and I began looking at them as vile human beings with the basest of minds. Thirdly, German leaders hate me for not showing any respect for them, but they never tell the whole truth in their accusations. They don't let it be known that they started the whole process by showing disdain for me. Many times they use other people, such as German masqueraders, to show constant disdain for me, and German masqueraders use others to constantly mistreat me. In fact, they never pass up an opportunity themselves, even forcing others with threats to belittle me and show contempt for me. That's why I despise them. And I, being a member of God's church and doing important work on its behalf, means that God's church despises them for being pompous asses. I use that specific phrase, ass, deliberately, as I will show in part 2 video. It's an old German trick to accuse others while conveniently forgetting that they started the wrong first. When the victim retaliated, they accused the victims of the wrong and used it to justify further wrong. For example, Germans accused the British and Americans of bombing their cities during World War II, while conveniently leaving out the fact that they nearly bombed London into total rubble first. Then, fourthly, it's very well known that Hitler was demon influenced and at times even demon possessed. Germans no longer hide the fact that they worship Satan the devil and literally obey whatever he commands them to do, meaning they too are demon influenced. Hitler's methods demonstrated Satan's ways in dealing with other people. The Germans have not stopped using these methods even today. For example, Hitler coveted neighbors' lands and terrorized weaker nations with threats. That's how he annexed Austria's Sudetenland and then Czechoslovakia. Then he made demands on Poland's territory, which finally woke up the British and the French to realize that there is no limit to Hitler's covetousness and demands. The Germans and German masqueraders have been using threats delivered electronically over the past 60 years, which enabled them to grab top positions in the best American and British corporations. With threats, they controlled the US and British economy. They used that economic power to financially reward those who would murder white adults and or children of non-German ancestry with the goal of exterminating them and taking over the land for themselves in perpetuity. That's how they controlled all top entertainers, musicians, sports stars, business leaders, lawyers, and other professionals who cremated 5 to 6 million whites alive in electric crematoriums and murdered 3 to 4 million more medically or in other ways. There is no limit to their covetousness. Hitler and his minions were famous for lying. They believed that if they repeated a lie often enough, people would begin believing it. Lying and deceptions has always been the German stock in trade even till today. German treachery throughout much of the history is well known. German masqueraders fought the American Civil War to preserve slavery and carve out a country for themselves. They have been the worst oppressors of African Americans. Then they decided to use the African Americans again through the civil rights movement in another bid to take over the country. In sheer treachery, they tried to portray themselves as friends of African Americans while their intent is to use them and then discard them. Hitler delighted in shedding blood and murdering people with the utmost cruelty, which is Satan's nature. That's why Satan is called the destroyer in the Bible. Since World War II, the Germans have orchestrated almost every major conflict in the world and have clandestinely murdered 120 to 150 million people worldwide, including through abortions. There is no other way to describe this than calling it pure evil. They have taught the same methods to the Chinese and other allies who have not been far behind in murders. The Chinese inveigled Cambodians to murder their own people by the millions, telling the Pol Pot regime that the only way for the revolution to succeed is to murder the intellectuals who oppose the revolution. This is diabolical, cunning craftiness. They tried the same tactics in India and Nepal, but not with the same success. Modi of India did that on a small scale in his Gujarat state. The number 5. Robbery and theft are in the Germans' DNA. Their philosophy is any which way you can win. Hitler confiscated Jewish and other nations' assets. In connivance with German masqueraders, Germany, China, and their allies have stolen and siphoned away trillions of dollars of American and British wealth by stealing technology, high paying American jobs, and then masqueraders bought products imported from Germany and China as much as possible. China's hand is thick in the $1 trillion strong pirated goods industry and illegal fishing to the tune of 15 to $20 billion. Having worked in the insurance industry, I have witnessed insurance fraud by German masqueraders on a mass scale, which costs American consumers $80 billion annually in higher premiums. Their methods of robbing others are too numerous and varied to list. Number 6. There are very few nations on earth whom the Germans have not victimized. Within nations, they choose a group of people, then sport them so that the group gains power. If they are successful in achieving that goal, then they get the economic benefit of access to that market. If not immediately successful, they sport their side, which usually leads to divisions. Divisions lead to violence and bloodshed as each side attempts to gain power. In this way, they have victimized almost all nations of the world and have had their hand in almost every war since World War II. Number 7. The Germans are not satisfied simply by having control over the lives of people. They like to inflict as much pain and suffering as they can on those who do not accede to their every demand. Some of the way they inflict pain and suffering is to prevent people from getting full sleep, troubling them with noise, or by damaging their property, or forcing them with threats to take action that will cause them harm or loss, and making life difficult for them in every possible way. Not only are they satisfied with inflicting pain and suffering on people who don't submit to them, they are also so wild that they pour filth on them literally. One of the ways they do so is not flushing the toilet so that others have to see their filth. I have personal experiences and observed with my own eyes how they have troubled business owners, owners of restaurants, hotels, motels, gas stations, and convenience stores this way, deliberately leaving their filth behind for them to clean up. This is for all the business owners who are not owned by their people. They contaminate people's food and drink with human and animal filth. Such incidents have been well publicized on the news. Take a survey of most so called uncivilized people on earth you can find, perhaps including those who dwell in untamed jungles, who some may call uncivilized, and ask them their opinion about people who contaminate people's food with human body waste. Almost all will say such people are the vilest scum and they are the dregs of humanity. Take a survey of all the 194 countries in the world except for Germany, China, and Narendra Modi's government in India. The rest of the world will universally condemn such behavior as being the vilest and most abominable kind, and such people as the lowest of the low with utterly debased minds. That is what the Germans are. I am describing this from personal observation and news reports. That's why I have the lowest opinion of them among all people on earth. Their minds and brains have become so debased, become so fetid due to imbibing Satan's philosophies, that such filth is constantly swirling in their heads. That is why they are able to commit such vile deeds. In summary, then, we can list some of the Germans and even now Chinese traits. They are haughty, think they are a superior race, despise and demean others. They have insatiable greed and covetousness for what belongs to others, such that they want to gather up all the resources of the earth for themselves. They hate the God of the Bible and particularly true Christians. They are treacherous, lying and deception are in their DNA, and their methods of dealing with others are diabolically cunning and crafty. They are bloodthirsty and evil people, seeking the destruction of most people on earth and wantonly murdering and killing many. And they are the vilest scum because of their abominable, filthy behavior of exposing people to filth and contaminating people's food. In part 2 video, I will describe God's opinion about the Germans and how he will deal with them. In part 3 video, I will describe what judgments God has made about the Germans and their allies in Bible prophecies and messages to me. Thank you very much for watching this video. Please continue to watch my videos on important world events, World War III watch, politics, international business, how Bible prophecy is playing an important role in world affairs, advice on health and medical problems, and much more for in-depth and insightful analysis. Please also subscribe to my YouTube and Facebook channels Unmasked Truth with Harmanjit Saini to view and get information on the latest videos.